How's it going, guys? My name's Ben. I'm a composer, and online I'm better known as Gengajupit. And yes, that is how you pronounce it. In 2018, I wrote a piece of music called Family Quest that uses the motif from the Family Mart jingle, which is a convenience store in Japan and I think some other parts of Asia. And basically, it's just a multi-sectioned JRPG overture orchestra track. So at the end of 2017, right around Christmas time, I had just finished a semester in Japan, actually my last semester of university, and I had come back and was kind of in limbo for a little while. I didn't really know what I was doing, so in April of 2018, I started working on a track because I had kind of been feeling kind of nostalgic and I wanted to write a track that sort of made me laugh, but also made me think of Japan, and then just kind of incorporated my love for, music, composition, and also some of the things that I got to experience while I was over there, and then mix in a bit of video game humor as well. So as I said, Family Quest is kind of a JRPG overture-esque kind of orchestral track that uses the Family Mart motif as the sort of basis for how the entire track is structured. So for those of you who don't know, the Family Mart jingle goes like this. It's just a pretty simple call and response kind of thing. So I thought, well, this would work. The A section is basically about establishing that motif, getting a few chuckles out, but also bringing back that nostalgia for the time that I was there. It sets up the idea behind the piece, telling you, okay, this is the Family Mart motif. Everyone, or at least every Japanese person knows it. Like I mentioned earlier, this piece was supposed to be sort of JRPG video game style. One of my favorite game soundtracks is Legend of Zelda: The Wind Waker, and so there's a sort of driving rhythm that plays in the very first island when you're on Outset, and that is played in the bassoon, the low woodwind instrument, and it just sounds, it's not really goofy, but it has a sort of clumsy kind of sound. And that's the driving rhythm behind it, so I thought, well, for those who recognize it, it might conjure up some images of that early part of that Zelda game. Even if you aren't familiar with the music, or at least you didn't pay attention to it that much, if you played The Wind Waker at least a couple of times, you probably would recognize that little motif right there. And so having that playing underneath as the Family Mart motif is going through, it was just sort of an idea I thought would be a good way to open the track up. So after the motif gets layered up with strings and woodwinds and horns and things like that, we lead into the B section, which is a sort of heroic trumpet solo. This was actually the first sort of, how should I put it, the first original part of music that I wrote for the track. The rest of it was sort of just arranging different harmonies around the Family Mart motif. So for this part, I just completely sort of, I don't want to say threw away the Family Mart idea, but it was pretty much put into the background to be a counter melody and a little supporting structural kind of sound. What I did here was I took the trumpet, which we associate in film with heroes and superheroes. It has a sort of bright, open, heroic sound, and I also tried to put in a sort of heroic sounding melody. So basically, as the trumpet is going along, we just have this new, unique melody that sounds kind of heroic, like the hero is about to go off on an adventure to Family Mart, and the piccolo is just kind of playing little counter flutters of the Family Mart jingle. And that's supposed to just sort of keep you aligned with the piece, so even though it's no longer the Family Mart theme, it's still present in the piece. So as that's all going on, we reach the sort of end of the section where it sort of transitions and swells as different instruments start building on each other in a rising sort of figure. It just kind of da 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 da. When that happens, the instruments are actually shifting as if it's about to go into a new key, like a new stage of the adventure. In a lot of Japanese music, they'll utilize the flat sixths and sevenths to make a shift in the music without necessarily shifting it. It's an easy way to sort of, if you want to make a key change, to shift the key right away. But for my sake, I sort of used it and then used it again to unshift the key, if that makes sense. Basically, the idea was to make a sort of big shifting moment that was kind of like, we're moving on to the next section, it's big, it's powerful, you're off on your journey. But because this is an overture, we can't just have the piece sort of keep building and building. There needs to be a sort of section for calm. And so the third section, we've got the cool down with the English horn doing this sort of slowly descending figure while the glockenspiel is sort of playing in a similar fashion to the piccolo, sort of in the background of the trumpet solo. Now we have the glockenspiel doing the same thing. The glockenspiel on its own sort of twinkles like stars. And so that's why I thought it'd be good for the cool down section, because it kind of sounds like nighttime. You're heading to bed, you're resting up for the night before you go back adventuring the next day. And so following that sort of transitional section, we've got the woodwinds playing an altered version of the motif. And so here, it's still obviously the Family Mart jingle, but instead of the Family Mart jingle that goes into a rising and then falling and then rising sort of call and response, we've got this version where the woodwinds are sort of descending down in a more calming tone, I guess. And that's sort of just a wind down, but then it ends sort of with the motif coming back up a little bit, sort of hinting at, okay, we've rested up, things are looking good, and that's when the piano comes in. So this sort of last section before the ending comes in, and it's the piano doing this really quick run. It's light, it's fluttery, it's not really supposed to represent anything, or at least when I was writing it, it didn't really represent anything in my head. It sort of made me think of that moment in an overture montage where you're just seeing a whole bunch of different scenes of the adventure sort of flashing before you, not really in any specific order. It's just a whole bunch of different parts of the adventure, good, bad, happy, sad, all that kind of stuff. I took an idea from one of my favorite soundtracks, the soundtrack from Wolf Children by Hosoda Mamoru, and I've actually got the score, or the piano score at least, right here. You've got this sort of alternating piano line in the lower bass register. And so that's what I was trying to imitate. You'll hear it in the music. So right here, you can see there's a lot of sort of alternating things going on here. I thought it was a really nice effect, a really neat effect that could definitely work in the sort of traditional JRPG fantasy sort of overture music. So while all that piano stuff is going on, obviously you have the violin coming in, playing the motif again, bringing it back to the forefront, and then the horn repeating it. But one of the things that I was trying to avoid was having it sound too final, because this isn't quite the final section. There's a slightly altered pattern. It's only one note different, but this is how the Family Mart theme usually sounds. It goes. Those last two notes, you get the A and then the D. I thought that sounded a little too final, so instead of having the, I had, which also had this sort of sound of finality, but it's a little bit altered. There's just a little more breathing room in there. And so what I wanted to do with that was to have that breathing room sort of leave you a little bit on edge, not in a bad place, but sort of expecting more, wanting a little more from it. So first it plays in the violin, and then it leaves you wanting a little bit more. So you get the repetition in the horn, and that horn does the exact same thing. And so now you're thinking, okay, I want a little bit more because I still haven't gotten that satisfaction. I could have kept repeating that pattern as many times as I wanted to, because it satisfies you for the most part, but that one note just kind of leaves you hanging a bit, like you haven't quite gotten that final resolution to tighten it back into one piece and finish off the track. After we have that sort of tease from the violin and the horn, we have the timpani, the crash cymbals, and the harp all sort of building up to culminate into the full orchestra with a choir on top. And really, there was no thought process for this. It was just make this as big and full and grandiose as it could possibly be. This is the end of the piece. It's not the end of the adventure, but it's supposed to be a culmination of everything that happened in this hypothetical Family Mart hero's journey. Honestly, there probably are a few things that I would change if I were to do rewrites and things like that. Now that I've actually written out the score, I have actually changed a couple other things. When I made this, it was mostly just for fun, and I wasn't thinking about technical compositional aspects. I can definitely see a lot of things that I could improve on the piece, but nothing is really pulling me back in saying, oh, you need to fix this. Never did I really think that it would get the recognition that it's gotten. I mean, to have the Japan Times pick it up for one of their podcast episodes and use that as the theme music for that episode, and then also to have indie game developers approach me and ask if they could use it for background music for their tracks. I mean, it's sort of surreal because this track was never meant to be anything more than just something to bring me back to Japan when I can't actually be there. I had always sort of planned to write more Family Mart adventure style tracks. And so I did write one in late 2019 around November, and I do have another one that I'm currently working on. It should be out probably sometime within the next few months. Anyway, that was just sort of a brief look into how I wrote a track that got a weird amount of attention for the fact that I wasn't trying to get attention with it. And I think that's all I've got to say about that. So thanks as always for watching. Like, subscribe, comment, support me over on Patreon, and I will see you guys in the next one.